call the January meeting of the Suffolk City School Board to order. And before we begin, I'd like to thank all my fellow council or board members for allowing me to come back and serve as your chairman again. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Enoch Copeland for being elected the vice chairman. Congratulations, Mr. Copeland.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the members as well and for the leadership that Dr. Nebraska is bringing to the board, and I will support him on as I have done in the past. I hope we'll make a good team. Thank you.
Thank you. This time I'd like to ask Mr. Copeland if he'd lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody please stand if you would.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have certification of the closed meeting, please.
Resolution of certification of the closed meeting of January 8th, 2015, pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended.
So moved.
Second. Board members will please vote. Motion carried.
We have no public speakers that have signed up for agenda items. If anybody would like to speak, we'll have time for you at the end of the program if you'd like to come up and speak with us. We'd like to hear what you have to say. This time we'll go to reports by the superintendent.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. As far as our good news report, I'm going to call to the podium Ms. Beth Ann Bradshaw to share some information with you about our upcoming School Board Appreciation Month.
Good evening. Each month we take this opportunity to share with you and our viewing audience the excitement, some of the good things that are happening in our schools, among our staff and our students. But with schools just reopening after a long winter break, we're simply going to take this opportunity to inform the community about a couple of special recognition events coming next month. And both involve those of you sitting at the dais. And both are sponsored by the Virginia School Boards Association. February is School Board Appreciation Month. We plan to use this month-long observance as an opportunity to help the community better understand the crucial role of the Suffolk School Board and what it does to play as advocates and decision makers in charge of Suffolk Public Schools. In addition, the third week of February is designated as School Board Clerk Appreciation Week to build awareness of the role the board clerks play in assisting school board members, the superintendent, and our local schools. As school board members, you might get invitations to events at our schools in February so that they can show their appreciation, and we'll provide more information with you at our February meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradshaw. Next on the item, as far as the superintendent's report, is the compensation and classification study report. You may recall last year this time, you all directed me, with the support of City Council, who paid for the majority of this study to take place. You directed me to have a compensation study take place throughout our school division. Dr. Suzanne Rice will be introducing the presenter today that will present the findings of this study. Dr. Rice.
Good evening, board members.
Good evening.
As Dr. Whitney alluded to, back in the fall, we contracted with Evergreen Solutions to conduct a compensation and classification pay study. And tonight with us, I have the project manager, Mr. Tom Masters, who's going to go over the process and the results that they found in this study. Mr. Masters.
Good evening, board members. My name is Tom Masters, and I'm a project manager with Evergreen Solutions. And I'm very pleased to be here tonight to present the preliminary findings of our study. I've been very close to this project over the last 3 months. Myself and a couple of our analysts and our project director, Dr. Resio, are excited to be at this point. So in this presentation, I'm going to go over a few things. I'm going to talk a little bit about the study process and our methodology. And then I'm going to go into each of those sections and kind of the overall findings, highlight some of the areas and some of the items that we found throughout these phases of the study. We'll talk about outreach and how we came on site and worked with Suffolk Public School employees. Talk about assessment of current conditions, which was a statistical analysis that we did at the beginning of the study to kind of do an environmental scan and see where Suffolk Public Schools stands before we made any recommendations. I'll talk a little bit about the market survey, and then we'll go over each of the recommendations that we have based on our study. And finally, I'll conclude and talk about a few of the next steps and also give you time to ask any questions you might have. Okay, so first thing that occurred in late September, September 26th, was a kickoff meeting in data collection. Towards the end of October, I think it was the week of October 27th, we conducted outreach and orientation sessions. We conducted the analysis of current conditions. And finally, the job assessment tool. And I'm going to go into each of these 6 components that are on the screen there on one slide at a time. This entire process started, like I said, at the end of September 26th, and is just now coming kind of to a conclusion. So about a 3-month process that we went through to reach this point. Okay, like I mentioned, on the 26th, we had our initial kickoff call where our project team got together with Dr. Rice and talked about the study process, walked her through our methodology, and answered any questions at the time. At that point, we also talked about any logistics, so the best time for coming on site to do our focus groups and orientation sessions with employees. What we did there is we planned for the focus groups and orientation sessions that we conducted the week of October 27th. During that 4-day visit, we conducted 28 focus groups with a cross-sampling of employees. So we selected light groups of employees from departments, 10 to 12 at a time, and asked them to come in and give us feedback on compensation and classification. And finally, during that 4-day visit, we provided kind of a mass presentation regarding the job assessment tool, what it is, how the employees would participate, and the logistics of it, so when they would receive emails about it. And that process occurred from November 3rd through November 21st. Okay, so the first phase of our study was conducting outreach. So like I mentioned, we came on and we asked employees to come in and give us feedback on the comp and class system. And this is just a few of the bullet points that we heard. Overall, employees were very pleased with the culture and climate of Suffolk Public Schools. So we typically get a lot of feedback about things not related to compensation and classification, and that really shined through in our focus groups. Bullet number 2 there, employees are concerned and were concerned about the compensation structure being under market. They're aware of pay and salary and benefits in other districts, and they express their concern that maybe they had an inclination that Suffolk Public School salary schedule is below market. Third bullet, many employees expressed concern with a lack of pay raises and inconsistency in pay raises over the years. And finally, we had employees that came forward with specific classification title issues. So one of the questions that we asked while we're on site is, what are some of the job titles out there that no longer accurately reflect the duties being performed? And many times employees will come forward and give us specific examples of those. Process number 2 in the study was to conduct an assessment of current conditions. So this is, like I said earlier, kind of an environmental scan. Yes, sir.
Yes, can I stop you there? Are you going to give us an example or a list of classifications that are not consistent with what we're offering?
Yes, sir.
You are
Yes,
going
sir.
to give that to us?
There's slides on the recommendations that we
Okay,
have.
all right, good.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Okay, so during the assessment of current conditions, we did 2 things. We analyzed the current compensation and classification system in place. So we looked at characteristics of the system, such as layout and the number of grades and the number of steps, how the plan is administered, and we looked at attributes of the plan, so range spread, the difference between minimum and maximum of any given pay grade. And we also looked at the overall classification system. So the number of class titles, hierarchy, reporting relationships, and that sort of thing. And finally, we did an analysis of employee demographics. So as you can see there, I just have a couple points listed that we found. Pretty high level, 13 departments, 1,837 employees included in the study, with an average tenure of 10.1 years. The job assessment tool, this study is designed basically to analyze two things and assess two things: internal equity and external equity. So internal equity is related to pay among classification titles here at Suffolk Public Schools, where external equity is related to pay compared to other school districts. So we looked at both of these aspects. For the internal equity piece, the job assessment tool is our main data collection instrument. It's basically a survey that we administer to all employees that allow them to tell us, basically give us an accurate reflection of how their job exists today. Jobs classification titles are scored based on the feedback we receive from all employees. The JAT tool went through multiple verification steps. So when an employee gave us feedback, we know that it's going to be pretty accurate, but we know there may be some things that they might miss. So we have a supervisor review period for that to verify the information. Evergreen reviews that to look for any outliers or inconsistencies. And we also allow HR here at Suffolk Public Schools to review it to see if anything looks out of line. Okay, the second piece, which I mentioned to measure external equity, or the variance or difference between pay here and pay in peer organizations, is the market survey. So for this survey, we included 55 job titles out of the 124 here at Suffolk Public Schools. We targeted 20 public sector peers for participation and 2 private sector peers. Both of those were hospitals. We also included data from our ERI database, or our Economic Research Institute database, which is a database of private sector data. Overall, during the 2 or 3 week salary survey period, we collected 371 matching data points. So across those 55 jobs, we had 371 different matches from other peer organizations. Just to mention, going back to bullet 2, out of those 20 public sector peers, we had 14 respond, which is an excellent response rate. The 2 private sector peers did not respond. That's very typical, and that's why we, Evergreen, maintain the ERI database as a backup to not being able to obtain necessarily private sector data from the peers that are selected. And at the very bottom is our overall finding. So overall, once we aggregated all the data and looked at the variances between the market, what they pay their classifications, and what classifications are paid here on the salary schedule, we found that Suffolk Public Schools is 0.2% above market at the very minimum, so very competitive at that starting pay level. And then as you move to market midpoint, Suffolk Public Schools is 5.6% below market. And then at the very top of the range, the salary range maximum, Suffolk Public Schools is 9.4% below market max. So what we see there is that from starting salary to top salary, Suffolk Public Schools becomes less competitive with the market. Okay, so detailed findings. Overall, those were our differences, our variance. So when we average all the variances for each job title, we came up with that 0.2, 5.6, and 9%. But at the micro level, when we pick out individual classifications and look to see what the outcomes were for individual classifications, we found a couple sore spots. Specifically, we found 11 classification titles that were below market by more than 20%. And we would consider those severely under market. We found 38 support level classification titles that were between 10 and 20% below market. And 10 to 20% we would consider moderately below market. And then we found that the teacher scale, because the teachers are on a separate schedule than support staff, is anywhere from 12 to 19% below market. So we looked and we compared teachers at the bachelor level, master's level, et cetera, all the way up through doctorate level to see what the variances were. Just why didn't we address the jobs from 0 to 10%? We found that 0 to 10% below market is still in line with market. There's a little bit of a give and take there for differences in jobs. You might have one person that shares a job title exactly like the job title at Suffolk Public Schools, but has a little bit different set of duties. So there's going to be a little variance in pay. So we consider anything from 0 to 10% below market still relatively in line with market. And then finally, we found that the average market range spread across all jobs, or the difference between the minimum of the pay and the maximum of the pay, is 66.5%. That's in comparison to about 52%, 53% here in Suffolk. Okay, so based on our findings through the JAT with internal equity, as well as market findings that I just shared, we came up with 6 total recommendations to address both compensation and classification related issues. We also calculated preliminary implementation costs for each recommendation. So we took a database that contained all of Suffolk Public Schools employee data, and we calculated what some of these recommendations, the impacts of these recommendations would cost. So moving folks around, that sort of thing. And 3 of the 6 recommendations have associated costs. These recommendations are specifically designed to bring Suffolk Public Schools to market. And then we are suggesting finally, before I go through these recommendations, that they be implemented obviously at once, but towards the end of the presentation we also offer, based on priority, a phased-in implementation plan. And the reason why we recommend that these be implemented all at once is because the market data and the JAT data that we collected over the last 3 months has a limited shelf life. A year from now, things will change. Other school districts will give cost of living increases or merit increases or shift their pay plan, and so the reliability on the data that we collected today will not be as high as it was a year from now, or is a year from now. Okay, the first recommendation that we have is to address those 11 job titles that are significantly below market. So by significantly, again, 20% or more below market. The total cost when we ran those numbers, and these costs include the benefits cost. So we first calculated the salary increase cost for the individuals in the classes that are affected, and then we use a percentage to also calculate the cost of the benefits associated with that. Recommendation 1 comes in a cost at $85,000. Okay, recommendation 2. We suggest that Suffolk Public Schools reclassify, or in other words, retitle 10 support position titles to better reflect roles and responsibilities. In these 10 titles, we found either roles or responsibilities will change over time and the job title doesn't necessarily. We see that sometimes. Sometimes one task that used to take one person to do has now grown so that the school district has 2 folks completing that, and they're kind of taking on different aspects of that task. So we want to make sure their job titles reflect those different responsibilities. And finally, sometimes we just see that 10 of the peers that provided us data are using a completely different class title that just is a better alignment and better fit for the roles and responsibilities of that job. And Suffolk happens to be the outlier using a different job title. So the cost to change the titles of those is $0. It's recommendations that we made based on what we found on the market and internally. Okay, recommendation 3. This was back when we talked about market results, and we find that the teacher scale is anywhere from 12 to 19% below market. This addresses not only the teacher scale being behind market, but also some of the inconsistencies that we saw on the teacher scale that weren't apparent in the support staff scale. And I have a little bit on the next slide to show you what I mean by that. But total implementation costs to bring the teacher scale up to market and address those inconsistencies totaled $3.88 million. And so on this slide, what you'll see on the left-hand side is the current Suffolk Public Schools teacher support scale.
That's on page 14 because it's difficult to see on the presentation up there. Page 14.
And what you're seeing here is just for the bachelor level, because the step percentage is really what we wanted to point out here. But it's the same for all the levels, bachelor, master's, etc. And so in the current teacher scale, there's a couple inconsistencies that we typically don't see when we do these studies. And if you see that last column, step percentage, that's the increase as an employee moves from one step to the next. And specifically steps 6 through 9 were of concern to us because the step increase in those steps, so someone with 6 to 9 years of experience as they progress through that area of the plan, they're only receiving a 0.4% increase over 4 years. Typical step increases, best practice is 1 to 5%. We also went out and looked at what market peers were offering in that same range. And we found that on average, peers were offering 6.4% growth over that same year range, so from 6 to 9 years. So with our proposed scale on the right, we've addressed that. We've offered more consistency in percentage increases across all steps. And we've also addressed some of the issues with combined steps. So it's very uncommon to see on the left-hand side those 21 to 22 years for 2 years straight someone sit in the same step. And the last thing that we've done with this, of course, is increase to bring it up to market. So each step value from 1 year here at Suffolk Public Schools is closer in alignment to 1 year at peer organizations. And finally, on the right-hand side, we've increased the range spread. So the difference between minimum and maximum of the pay grade, or I mean the salary range, we've aligned that more with market as well. Okay, recommendation 4. This recommendation is meant to address the 38 classifications on the support scale. So back to the support scale, that were found to be between 10 and 20% below market. There were also 2 particular classification titles that once we had our market data and our JAT data, we found that when we regraded these 38 that fell into that range, it wouldn't make sense to keep the middle school principal or high school assistant principal where they were. So in other words, our data said that some of the principals needed to be regraded, and it brought an elementary school principal above a middle school principal. So when we find that, when the market indicates and we find those pockets of inconsistency, we also have to address those in our recommendations. And the total cost to regrade the 38 classifications found to be 10 to 20% below market, plus the 2 classifications listed there, is $741,000. So those are the four recommendations that have major impacts on compensation and classification practices here at the division. The next 2 are really recommendations for maintenance of the plan moving forward. Whether this is implemented or not, we would recommend that every year Suffolk Public Schools picks a small grouping of classification titles and goes out and collects market data on those titles. just to see what the average shift in movement in the market is. Earlier I mentioned that our data wouldn't be good necessarily a year from now. We wouldn't have as much confidence in it. So this helps to kind of feel out the market and feel which way it's moving. Finally, the last recommendation, recommendation number 6, is kind of another maintenance issue. And although those small salary studies are good from year to year for a couple years, after about 5 to 7 years, we find that a compensation plan becomes, you need to go out and do the full shebang and kind of look at all your classification titles and do another, macro look at the entire comp and class system. So this recommendation 6 says every year, whether internally or not, go out and do a full-blown compensation classification study, market study similar to this. And the cost to that, it can be completed with internal resources. So when we walk away, we leave all the tools that we've used throughout our study, the job assessment tool, the salary instrument, salary survey instrument, the solution database, all of it is available to Suffolk Public Schools to conduct this process. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, if the decision is made to phase in these recommendations, we've prioritized and put together a plan that we think would best address compensation class issues that we found. So just very quickly, this summarizes here. Phase 1 would include recommendations 1, 2, and 3, which is your support staff that are 20% or more below market, your teacher scale inequities, and the classification title, just the retitles of those positions. Phase 2, if this recommendation was to be phased in, is you're addressing those support positions that were found to be 10 to 20% below market in phase 2. And then phase 3 are a little bit longer term, which is just the maintenance of the plan over time. Okay, so just to kind of summarize, total implementation cost across all recommendations total $4.7 million. We found overall that Suffolk Public Schools is below market. You start right there, competitive at the lowest end of the spectrum, and then you slowly become less competitive with market peers over time, as well as there's a lot of pockets of jobs that are well below that, below market. Okay, and then implementation of this new structure that we proposed, it'll ensure internal equity among all jobs and classifications. It'll ensure that the district is able to, or the division, I'm sorry, is able to retain and recruit employees. It'll allow for flexibility in administration, and it'll provide for ample growth, or at least growth that's concurrent with the marketplace in each job title, classification, and pay range. And most importantly, our recommendations are backed by data. So we have the JAT scoring, the market data, everything to support what we've found, and those systems, like I mentioned, going forward that can be used again to continue to update the system and make sure that the compensation and classification system here stays on par with the market. Okay, there's a couple next steps because we don't know what will happen with these classification titles. When and if they are approved, the classification title changes. Two of the last steps that we do as part of this process are revise job descriptions. So we take all the existing job descriptions that Suffolk Public Schools has now, and using that JAT data and that instrument we use with all the employees, we update the job descriptions so that they're accurate and they're formatted nicely, that sort of thing. And we also develop the solution database. So whatever is decided, whatever piece of implementation is done, we take the database of employees and slot them into their grades and hand it over to the district so that it's an easy transition, so that they have the data they need to implement. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to address any questions at this this time.
Questions for you. What is considered the market? What is the middle market that you're trying to compare us to? Is that the middle of the financial scale in each system where you're trying to get this information from for us? Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. So when we collected information from the peers, and I'll read them off if that's okay.
I was going to be my next question, if you had the peers.
Yes, sir, I do. Okay, so the 14 peers that provided us with data that we used in the study for those 371 data points: Chesapeake Public Schools, City of Chesapeake, City of Newport News and the school division, City of Norfolk and the school division, City of Virginia Beach, Hampton City Schools, Isle of Wight County and the school system, Portsmouth Public Schools, Richmond Public Schools as well as the city, and Virginia Beach City Public Schools. So I believe we hit on most of the major ones.
Major ones, right.
Yep.
Now, you're saying to get us to this point, this is not an upper scale, this is the middle of the scale for all of these people who we're trying to get. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Correct.
Okay.
So when we make our recommendations, we look at we look at minimum and maximum.
Maximum, right.
But we also look at that midpoint. That's the best indicator that we believe for true market worth. So that's where we make the comparison, is at midpoint.
Questions by board members? Yeah. Go ahead.
I don't understand where recommendation 4, regrade the 38 classifications found to be between 10 and 20% below market midpoint, as well as the middle school principal and high school assistant principal classifications. I just didn't understand what you said about that. Could you repeat that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So we include 55 classification titles on the salary survey. So that's not all classification titles. We found that if we go above that, school districts, school divisions, cities, they won't respond to our survey. They look at it and they just say that's too much.
Okay.
So what we do is we do a cross-sampling of jobs, and then we take the market data and the JAT internal score, and we come up with a predicted value for that job. So we can estimate or predict a market value for any of the jobs that we need to that weren't included in the study. So with that said, when we found these 38 were below market between 10 and 20%, we went back and saw if we raise them up to higher grade levels, what does that do to the jobs that weren't necessarily included on the study? Where does that leave them? And we found that the middle school principal and high school principal fell in below where we would recommend the elementary school principal and the other principals be. So we had to bring them up, even though they don't show as being below market, to maintain that internal equity.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Your study also appears to have indicated that the teachers in the 6 through 9 area were the ones that really need consideration. Is that true?
Yes, sir, that's true.
Okay.
One of the things I'd like to say to you is thank you very much. You affirmed for me what our staff talked to us about. Ms. Forsman, would I be accurate in saying last year and year before last? And I know we talked about the 6 through 10 year and where we placed with regard to teaching, but for all of this, and it is our hope that, at least my hope, that since you are a company, it's the same company, did you do the compensation thing for the city of Suffolk as well?
Yes, ma'am. I wasn't personally involved in that project.
But your company?
Yes, ma'am.
Your company did. So it is our hope that, since we've been validated and affirmed in several ways, that we can move forward with this. And I just want to say thank you very much.
Very welcome. Thank you.
We do appreciate the fact that you have affirmed what we've talked about for quite some time. And so maybe with this we can move forward. It was, of course, at a cost, and we did a couple of years ago for free, but what in the world? Here we have data, and it works very well for most of us. Thank you.
There's another question I don't understand. The part where it says market survey detail findings, Okay, the bottom bullet says average market range spread of 66.5%. I'm sorry, I'm not a statistician, and I don't understand. Could you repeat what that means?
Yes, ma'am. That's the percentage difference from minimum to maximum of a pay grade. So if a teacher is at a bachelor's, if we go back to that schedule here, starting out there at the bottom, we'll just use the current scale for an example, at $39,290 per year. The range spread is the difference between that maximum of 59 and the 39, just represented as a percentage. So basically, your growth, your available growth in a percentage. So,
Okay, thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Anybody else? Thank you, sir. Thank you for bringing your information to us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your
And
time.
I'd like to thank the city council for allowing us to do this survey with their blessing and also the concern for our welfare as well. So thank you very much. At this time, would it be wise to talk about this here? I'm going to make a suggestion and see how you all feel about it, okay? I think we need to go ahead and ask the city council for a reasonable amount of money, and that amount of money would be the teacher's salary scale itself, the improvement in the teacher salary scale itself, which is approximately $3.7 million.
I think it was 3.8.
$3.8 million. That would be the amount I would like to ask, if it's okay with all of you, we can talk about that, but $3.8 million to put the teachers alone on scale, where the rest of the staff would be the support and other administration. We would provide a step raise as well. Could we provide a step raise with that?
If I'm hearing you correctly, the budget that we're working on now to include the recommendation from Evergreen to address the teacher salary scale and to attempt to also give every other employee a step increase.
Yes, that would be on us to do. That would be
Yes.
out of our budget to do.
We can certainly look at that and see what we can do with that and bring back something as we develop the budget. Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would, of course, support asking the council for the money for teachers, but I also have to say this. I'm concerned in that our consultant just told us that the figures will change if we don't implement it, even as they recommend it. The figures are going to change. And so if we don't implement it in accordance with what we're told it's going to cost, the $4.7 million, if we don't implement it now, the data that we just got, that just cost, as I understand it, about $80,000, is going to change. Is that not what you
That's what he
just
said.
told us?
That's what he said.
And if then we phase in according to their recommendation, they've recommended that those persons who are our classified persons who are 20% below ought to be compensated as well, as I understand it, with recommendation 1, 2, and 3 at the same time. So I could not support just asking for the teachers and nobody else, because the thing is going to be thrown off again. It appears from what I just heard, unless I'm misunderstanding something, it's going to be thrown off again if we just ask for one segment of it. The rest of it is going to be thrown out of balance. And since it was at the city's recommendation that we do the compensation study, I'm, I guess, at a loss for why we're not asking them for what we need as a result of the compensation study. And if we do have to do a phase-in for whatever reason, then we do the phase-in based on what the consultant just recommended, 1, 2, and 3, not just taking the teacher's salary and leaving the other parts out.
Well, my concern is that if we ask for something now, I feel reasonable, certain we can get it, and I feel that $3.8 million is a reasonable request. I feel that we can support the other part of the study by our own means within our own budget, if we look at our budget closely.
If I may, if we were to work within our own the funding that we currently have, because we do know that at this point it does look like there will be no reductions from the state, if we're able to provide a step for everyone other than the teachers and just implement the teacher recommended scale, that may address the exact amount of the recommendations that were being made or that's been presented here.
So what we're saying is the 11 support positions that we're talking about regrading, we would have the $85,000 that we needed.
That's
We would find that in our budget to do that.
That would be the charge that we would face,
And
yes.
then the $740,000 that's going to be out of line, and it'll probably be more by the time we get to do it. What then is the recommendation for that, the 38 classifications found that are 10 to 20% below market? What do we have a plan or some idea?
I think we have a plan in place. I think
about
the
four.
plan is that we've been saving money the last 2 years, and we can use that money to, we know that we've got a savings plan in place as far as our spending is.
I wouldn't call it a savings plan, as opposed to there have been some cuts that we have made
Right.
that has allowed us to move money to different areas, and that's what it sounds like you're recommending that I do, as far as making certain that we provide a step for every other employee. Will it address all of the entire amount as far as if we were to move with the recommendations? It may not, but it would allow every employee to receive a step, which we know that they have not over the many years.
Well, you're only talking about what you recommended, Dr. Dobransky, was $3.7 million. $3.8 million. Okay, that's only $900,000 short of the total recommendation of this company.
That is correct.
Right.
So it seems that I think we should try to go, try to, just as Dr. Brooks-Buck said, we should try to ask for everything we need and justify it by this study. Then, instead of working around something, we can, if we have to, work down from there. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, makes sense. Mhm.
I guess my concern is you have not, because you asked not. Now, the idea was to get the study done so that we'd have a basis for making the request. The study has been done. This is just not some conjecture that's been done haphazardly. It's been done very scientifically, and it's the same process as used by the city to award their employees salary increases. So I truly believe that we need to ask for what we need. Now, if we don't get it, it's not an insult to anyone that we ask for it, but if we don't get it, then we backtrack and do whatever it is we need to do to get what we need. But I definitely don't believe we shouldn't ask for it in the first place. Or at least make the need aware, make people aware of the need that we have based on the compensation study, because that was the whole purpose of spending. The city gave us $70,000 to do this, am I correct? And it's been done, so it just doesn't make sense to me not to go back and say, here are the results, and this is what we need to look at.
I agree with you to a point. I think that we've been asked to conserve, and we've done a good job in conservation. So I think that we should show that in our attempt to support some of that budget with our own needs. That's my feeling.
I feel that, the crisis that we're in is with the loss of teachers every year who are leaving to go somewhere else. And the recommendation that was made by Evergreen was that we implement the teacher step first while giving everyone else a step increase or a percentage raise. And I think that, I think that would do a lot for the morale of our instructional staff that is so poor at this time, if they can see that we're giving everyone a raise and we're focusing this year on the teachers. I just feel like we would get a lot of, in addition to a lot of satisfaction, we'd get a lot of support and be able to satisfy a lot of people's needs. I don't know if anybody could do one example, just so that what we're talking about here. If you look at, on the current scale, a bachelor teacher is making $41,810. If they move up to step 11, that same teacher next year would, on the recommended scale, would be making $46,725. That was at step 10. And I think that just gives perhaps the people that are listening at home, just to let you know the type of increases that the proposed study is talking about.
Now, let me get this through my head. At first, we were saying we was going to phase in, if I'm correct. We do the teachers first, and give a step to the rest of the employees this year, well, in the budget. But now we're saying we're going to ask to implement the full request here for all 3 areas of employees. We're going to ask for all the money for all 3 areas of employees, and they all will be on the scale.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay.
At least if that's what you're talking about, what I said. I listened to the presenter who said that if we change the way that we do this, the information that we have will be invalid, basically. If we don't implement it, if we don't ask for it, there's a sentence on here.
Okay, I understand that part. It changes every year.
And if we do a phase-in, the recommendation here is we do 1, 2, and 3, which would mean that the support people who are severely below the market at 20%, according to the study, would need the $85,000. Now, from what I'm hearing you say, Dr. Dobransky, you believe that somewhere we have $85,000 so that we could support that on our own.
Yes, that's exactly
And
what
then
I'm saying.
you're saying that, so we shouldn't ask for that. I guess my question is, why wouldn't we ask for it? And if we don't get it, then we can go back to the drawing board. I'm just concerned about why we're afraid to ask for what the study that the city paid for says we need.
May
May I?
Dr. Whitley, didn't we have money that we turned back to the city this year?
Yes, we did. And the rationale, the reasoning behind that was workman's comp came in a lot lower than we had anticipated. In fact, Wendy, if you'll come to the podium and explain specifically how that, I think it was roughly $900,000 that we had as far as the areas of where it comes from.
As you know, every year we receive information from the state as to what our funding is going to be. That's based on the March 31st ADM. Well, this year, the state didn't report to us until June 7th that what our final numbers were going to be. Well, as you all know, June 7th is way too late for us to go out for bid for anything that we could possibly need. And several numbers came in higher on the state's revenue than were anticipated. In addition to that, we had several cases for workman's comp that were supposed to happen last year that did not. The review board got moved to the new year. And so those costs that we were anticipating that the workman's comp folks had told us would be in the numbers didn't come through. So we had almost $200,000 left there. So between all of those items, we ended up with about $910,000 that Dr. Whitney and the city manager have discussed what will go on with that money, but we did have that money as a payable to the city at year end.
That's the reason I asked that question, because what Dr. Nebraska was alluding to, that maybe within the budget, some cuts, something like this may come up again. And,
But what about the $1 million we owe them?
Right.
Million we
Right.
There's that other $1 million.
Well, it's not a matter of owing it to them.
Yeah.
Remember, we used the one-time million amount that was given to us. We included that as part of the increase for all staff members. Wendy, you want to speak to that as well?
That was one-time funding last year. There was an appropriation for $1 million that the city did as a one-time separate appropriation. And they were very clear with us that was one-time money. Now that consisted of about $900,000 from the city and about $150,000 from us. So together it was about $1,070,000. And that is one time. So that now goes away in the new year when we start talking about revenue. So I can tell you that last year was an anomaly. It was not something that we normally have happen where we get our final numbers so late. that we can't make plans to use it because, as you know, we have many needs. And it also, as you can remember, the previous years, we've given back to the city less than $50,000. So it was definitely an anomaly that we got our information too late to do something with it. And as you know, by law, we're not allowed to save or hold back fund balance.
Let me ask you this as well. You mentioned just now that there are workman's compensation things that were to be settled last year that have been moved to the new year.
Right.
You mean this year?
Yes, ma'am.
So we're talking about the money that we had to give back last year, we have to deal with possibly giving out this year. Does that make sense to you? So it doesn't sound extra to me.
It was not extra.
I want you to know, excuse me, Ms. Barry, I want you to know, I'm not questioning the process that you're saying. I just need to get it through as to, are we looking at the full funding of the recommendation from Evergreen for all staff this year? Are we looking at bringing some folk up to scale, some parts, and then reaching the other process? But now I see there is some funding that we need to look at before we make that recommendation. I'm just trying to see where we belong here in this situation. Okay. All right, Ms. Barron, thank you.
We did one of these studies. When was the last time we did one of those?
2007.
Okay. And what occurred when we did that?
Nothing.
That's
We didn't
what I
implement
said.
it at all.
Okay. And that cost quite a bit of money at that time.
Mhm.
Right. And as we speak, as Dr. Buck said, it is cha-ching, cha-ching is changing as we speak. So we need to ask for $4.7 million is what we need, right? To implement all phases. That's the way I see it.
And keep in mind, when we talk about that 4.7 million, that is a matter of addressing those who are below market value. We still have employees that we would want to give them either a step or a cost of living increase. So either way you look at it, we're going to be looking at our budget as we do each year to say, where can we find the funding? What do we have to reduce, eliminate, or change so that we can provide either a cost of living raise, a cost of living increase, or if it's a step. Either way, we're going to be doing that. So we're prepared to do it either way and bring it back to you, whether it's full implementation and the remaining employees receiving a step or something. I shouldn't commit to a step or a cost of living increase depending on what funding we have, or if it's implement the teacher portion and then everyone else implement a step or a raise, depending on, again, what we're able to do when we look at our numbers.
I'd like to ask Mr. Masters, if we were to put off recommendation number 4 for 1 year, how dangerous would that be? I mean, would they fall? How much further behind would those folks fall?
Sure, and the best way to approach that is to, in a year or at any point when you feel you're ready to address those, is just to go out and look at your peers and say, what have you done over the last 2 years? Have you given a 1%, a 1.5%, a 2%, and kind of look at the landscape, determine what it is on average, and just add that to the figure, because that's what our number would be behind by at that point, approximately. So.
Thank you.
I would think, however we come up here, that every employee needs something this time. I don't know how we're going to figure it out. We'll work with the implementation of the study, but every employee, because if we just work with this, they're going, as you say, getting folks up to on the scale. There are going to be others that won't get anything for the year.
If I may, I want to make sure that it's clear that I certainly am not recommending that we only target one group. I agree with you 100% that we need to address every employee. Will we be able to bring their salary up to be as competitive as we'd like? Perhaps not, but I do believe every employee deserves some type of increase for next year. And the interesting thing is when we look at the proposed scale, we've looked at surrounding salary scales for teachers to see just where we fall. You may recall in the past from years 6 through 11, we ranked 9 out of the 11 divisions that we assessed. If we were to look at their scales now, and we have to be careful with that because we don't know what they're going to do. They may be giving raises. As opposed to being number 9, would be 6 out of 11, which is mid-range, which makes perfectly good sense. But again, that can change depending on what they do with their salaries or what we don't do with ours.
I have a motion. We're going to table this issue until we have further discussion. What's your pleasure?
I can bring you back, obviously, in February, I bring a proposed budget, and I can bring you what we're capable of doing once we get, obviously, you don't have the written form of this. We'll have the written form by then, as well as we'll be able to look at our numbers. Again, with this year's receiving level funding from the state, that's encouraging, because as we decide what we're going to reduce or what we can cut or what we saw came in lower than what we had anticipated, we'll be able to include that in the proposed budget come February.
That sounds reasonable, that you would bring in next next month.
Right.
The proposal for the 2. Yeah.
May I ask one other question, please? Well, there is the one of the things that cost us a lot last year was the health insurance. Now, when we're talking about if our budget is exactly the same, and we're talking about just increasing it by the amount that we need to satisfy at least part of this study, what do we envision is going to happen, if we can, about the health insurance costs that just went up? I don't know, Ms. Forsman, what percentage did they go up last year, and what do you think we could expect this year, and how is that going to impact what we're able to do? Or do you know?
Well, it's hard to determine.
Yeah.
Health insurance costs have been going up double digits everywhere around us. And as you know, 2 years ago, we made some changes to our plans that doubled copays for our folks, raised the rates for our folks coming out of their checks every 2 weeks, and we made some changes to the overall plan. Now, at that time, because we made those changes, health insurance between that year and the next didn't cost us anymore. Now, last year, because we didn't get the numbers until very late and the cost went up 5.9%, we were able to make some minor changes that didn't affect employees, and we were able to cover those costs. We do not have those numbers for next year yet. However, we have put many cost-saving measures in place. As you know, we are replacing some full-time positions with part-time positions. These part-time positions don't require retirement. They don't require health insurance. And so those cost savings are being put back in, or will be put back in, to all the numbers for us to decide exactly how we're going to need to cover costs next year. So there's lots of things that we've been trying to do from a lot of angles in order to save money and to do what we can to mitigate those increased costs that we see every year with health insurance.
I guess that's sort of an answer.
Oh, we know at this
I
moment.
know it's the best you can do right now.
Ms. Bouchard and Dr. Buck, I'd like to ask you to go ahead and pursue that with the committee, the Finance Committee, if we could combine our health insurance with the city's health insurance.
Well, of course, that's a real big deal. I mean, it's not, we can ask, but...
Well, I think that's one of the reasons that we put that committee together, to pursue different ideas.
And that's one of the things that we did indeed talk about.
We
Ms.
did.
Bouchard and I talked with them about the fact that there were several things. And if you recall our joint meeting with council, when the full board and the full council met together, we talked about a list of issues that we now have. Mr. Dooman brought them to our last meeting. So we have a list of things, of joint ventures that we talked about considering during that meeting. And I think that we need to go back and revisit.
I think that's I agree with you.
That's one of the things.
And also the medicine, the
drugstore thing that we
yeah,
talked
I think so.
about,
Those
yeah.
two are important. Those would bring us.
It's not that we couldn't, I mean, it's not that, this is one of the things, it's a great idea. It increases the pool of insured. But the other thing is, do they want to do it? We don't know that yet. And Ms. Forsman, it would really take a long time to explore that, though, wouldn't it? That aspect. I mean, we're just
Years ago, we
brainstorming
looked at it,
here.
right. 2 years ago, when we were looking at joint services, the HR department and my group looked at how would we marry the two. There were several barriers at that point that still exist. One is their philosophy of insurance is very different from ours. They do not subsidize families the way we subsidize families. They have a co-insurance, which means their employees pay 20% of the bill. And ours is not a co-insurance. Ours has a deductible and co-pays. So it's a different animal.
A whole different system.
A whole different system. We have the larger group.
Mm-hmm.
So then we would be, the burden would be on our school system to disaggregate the data and bill them every month and try to figure out who owes what bill for what thing. And that was a big barrier because who would do that work? That's quite a bit of work on a monthly basis when you're talking about well over $1 million in claims each month. Another thing,
You could just add that to your duties, couldn't you, with no problem?
yes, ma'am. But there was also some philosophical differences that they were going to have to resolve with regard to the Affordable Health Care Act, and that we were going to have to resolve with regard to the Affordable Health Care Act. And at the time that we looked at that, it was just beginning. We didn't have the regulations. Nobody knew which way it was going to go. And we just felt at that time there were just too many barriers and not enough cost savings to put it together. Because when you've got to realize it's not insurance because we're self-insured. We pay dollar for dollar what's paid to the physicians or the hospitals or the pharmacies or whatever. So it's not like an insurance where you have a pool and it's a risk pool and they look at a bigger pool and it's less risk. It's not like that. We pay as a self-insured client. So it's a different animal than normal regular insurance with risk pools. And so when we looked at it then, we tabled it until after the full implementation of the Affordable Health Care Act so we would know really on the other side where we both stood on solid ground before we tried to even consider doing something like that.
Yeah, but the bottom line, even if we did it, it would be at least a 2-year study at best. It's just a very long and complicated thing. And the answer to your question is yes, of course, we are going to bring that to them and discuss it. Yeah.
I think the other question that I would have is we had the presentation from Chesapeake Public Schools about the drugs, the drugstore, the pharmacy program.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that something that would be, not talking about the complex insurance and whatever, but is that something, because we did talk about the possibility of joining with Chesapeake and joining with some other people to see if that would reduce costs to our employees, because we're going to give the minimal raises that we possibly can. If we can cut costs for our employees in some other ways, then that might be helpful. Do you think that's something that we could pursue without, now we would just ask and people would do a presentation and of course we bring it back to the board and they take it back to the council, but is that something that even seems reasonable for us to consider?
If I may, I do think it's something to consider. I think when we looked at the initial data, doing it independently, we didn't see a lot of cost savings because of our size. But if we were to partner with Chesapeake or perhaps partner if the city was interested as well, it's worth exploring to see.
Send the data to Chesapeake for them to review and to explore as to whether or not they could even do that and add us to their group as far as the pharmacy is concerned. There's contract issues, there's insurance issues, a lot of issues of databases and how do you get access to database in order to be able to provide that service. And they're working their way through those issues, but it is a slow process to do that. If you remember when he came here from Chesapeake and discussed this, the gentleman told you that it took between 5 and 7 years for them to even get it implemented in their own system, let alone add an outside group.
System.
And so they are exploring it. I do speak with the gentleman about every month or so to find out if they've given it more consideration, what they're looking at. And we've also talked several times, he and I, about the fact that they don't have a western branch location right now, or a
Something that's close
Churchland,
to
Western
us.
Branch,
Near
Northern
North
and
Suffolk,
Branch.
yeah.
Exactly. And he said that they're working their way towards that too. So I don't know if Chesapeake's awaiting getting that up and running before they decide to add us or not add us, or where they are with that. But I believe that they're working through their issues and then adding ours to see what they can do with it for us. I mean, it's still very much under consideration by them, and we are very interested if we can do something with them. As Dr. Whitney said, the cost figures for us to do it on our own were just prohibitive.
With the board's permission, Dr. Whitney, would you come back and fit with the February meeting with suggestions and
Yes.
alternatives for us to?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thank you. No. Special events. It's calendar of special events.
All right, next on the agenda, you can see the calendar of special events, and that is on page 22. I'd like to point out the first item, which was yesterday, the Custodial Workers Appreciation Day. Each school recognized their custodian in their own special way, but I just want to publicly thank our custodians for the work that they do on a regular basis. Also, you can see the last item is the Suffolk Education Foundation Masquerade Gala Celebration of the Arts. This is on March 3rd, and there's a registration form, I think a few pages beyond your calendar of special events. On the very next page, the calendar of special events is the ABCs of Family Engagement Workshop, which is Thursday, January 22nd. It's from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Nasman River High School. We invite all parents or all families to attend that on January 22nd, again, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And that concludes the superintendent's report, Mr. Chair.
Board members, please pay your attention to the consent agenda and see if any items need to be taken and moved to new business. We'll take 2 minutes to look at it, please. Can I get a motion to accept the consent agenda, please?
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as
Second.
listed.
Board members will please vote. Motion carried.
Unfinished business, financial plan for next year.
I think we've discussed that. We certainly have. You've given us direction as to what we need to do as far as preparing for the proposal in February, so we'll do just that.
Okay, new business resolution number 1415-21, adopting a code of ethics for members of the Suffolk City School Board. Need a motion.
I'd like to ask the clerk if she could read that for us and the public.
A resolution of the School Board of the City of Suffolk, Virginia, adopting a code of ethics for members of the Suffolk City School Board. Whereas, as a member of the Suffolk City School Board, it is important that each member of the school board strive to be an advocate for students to improve public education. Whereas, each member of the school board should have integrity in all matters and support the full development of all children and the welfare of the community, Commonwealth of Virginia, and nation. Whereas each member of the school board should attend school board meetings and seek to be informed concerning issues under consideration. Whereas each member shall make policy decisions based on available facts and appropriate public input. Whereas each member of the school board understands that the authority for the administration of the schools is vested in the superintendent, and the superintendent is responsible for establishing a process of accountability for administrators. Whereas each member of the school board will seek to encourage individual school board member expressions of opinion and will also seek to facilitate an open two-way communication process with all segments of the community. Whereas each member of the school board agrees to communicate to the full school board and superintendent in accordance with school board policies, public reaction, and opinion regarding school board policies and school programs. Whereas each member of the school board will seek to encourage desired changes through legal and ethical procedures in accordance with all laws, state regulations, and court orders pertaining to schools. Whereas each member of the school board agrees not to use the position of school board member for personal or partisan gain and will seek to avoid any conflict of interest or the appearance of impropriety. Whereas each member of the school board will respect the confidentiality of privileged information and will make no individual decisions or commitments that might compromise the actions of the school board or school administration. Whereas each member of the school board will seek to be informed about current educational issues through individual study and participation in appropriate programs, such as those sponsored by the Virginia School Boards Association and the National School Board Association. Whereas each member of the school board will always remember that the foremost concern of the school board is to improve and enhance the teaching and learning experience for all students in public schools in Virginia. Be it resolved, therefore, that each member of the school board has indicated their agreement with this resolution and has affixed their signature to the same this 8th day of January 2015.
I move that we adopt the Code of Ethics.
Second.
Difficulties. Board Member Bouchard,
Yes.
Board Member Brooks Buck,
Yes.
Board Member Byram,
Yes.
Board Member Mitnick,
Yes.
Board Member Skeeter,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Copeland,
Aye.
Chairman Dobransky.
Yes,
Motion carried.
thank you. This time, I'd like to ask any members of the audience if they'd like to come before the board with non-agenda items. You don't have to sign up for this time. If anybody here would like to speak to the board about non-agenda items. Seeing none, we'll move on. Business by board members. Let's start with Mr. Mitnick, our newest member. Welcome, Mr. Mitnick. Thank you for being here, and congratulations on your winning your school board seat.
Thank you, Dr. Dobransky. I'd just like to say it's a pleasure to be on the Suffolk City School Board. I'm surrounded by great folks who have been very welcoming, and I feel like my transition will be very smooth. I want you to know that they have also elected me to represent the school board on the Suffolk Education Foundation, which is very near and dear to my heart, so I get to continue as a member on the board of the directors of the Suffolk Education Foundation. And as Dr. Dobransky mentioned, we do have a gala coming up, and information will be coming out in the community so that people will be able to purchase tickets for what's been guaranteed as an evening of entertainment that's not going to be comparable anywhere else. So we hope all of you will consider attending the gala on the 3rd of March.
Skeeter.
Happy New Year to each of you, and Mr. Mitnick, glad to have you as an official board member as of tonight. I'd like to thank the many citizens out there that have supported me to remain as your school board member for the Cypress Borough for the next 4 years, and I plan to work as I've worked for the last 21 years. That's best for our students' education and for you as employees of the Suffolk Public School. Thank you, and call me anytime. Not anytime, up until 12 o'clock at night, call me. Thank you.
Dr. Buck.
Well, Happy New Year to you, and again, I'd like to say welcome. We said it privately, but to say publicly welcome, Mr. Mitnick. I look forward to working with you. And as we met and learned about you, I realized we were teaching in Norfolk Public Schools at the same time. So, welcome. We're back together again, many years ago. Many years ago. I had a wonderful experience today volunteering in Northern Shores Elementary School, one of my favorite places to be. And so I feel blessed to be able to do that kind of thing, and also to watch the teachers as they work with children and as they communicate with children. I think it's just a privilege to be able to do that. So I want to say thank you to all of our teachers and our staff and our bus drivers and all of those folks who work together to make this a wonderful school system. Look forward to a great year.
Sorry.
Happy New Year, and I also thank you for allowing me another 4 years to serve on the school board. And just one other thing, I want to thank Dr. Dobransky and Mr. Copeland for being willing to lead us. I'm glad you like it. But anyway, thank you.
Special wish for all of our employees that they have a wonderful new year and a very productive new year to help our young people. And Mr. Mitnick and I believe even before he was sworn in, we attended a webinar on budget and finance. So he has had a 3-day workshop on budget and finance, and he has learned quite a lot. And we really had a good time doing that together. And I look forward to working with Dave. I worked with him on the Suffolk Education Foundation previously, and I know he's a gung-ho educator from way back. He has a vast amount of experience, and I know he's going to help us a great deal, give us a lot of insight into many things that he has accomplished over the years. And I look forward to working on the Prudent Board again with Mr. Copeland and Ms. Skeeter, and Pupil Personnel Committee, where we spend a lot of time.
Copeland.
Thank you, Dr. Dobransky. I, too, would like to thank my colleagues for their trust in me in that they elected us, they decided that we would serve another term as vice chair of the Suffolk City School Board. I also would like to thank my supporters out in the Holden Neck Borough for their confidence and allowing me to serve 4 more years. And I too have spent my entire life in education, one way or the other. It goes way, way back to the time I started school, and that was in the 40s. So I have enjoyed working with the young people of this city and at one time in the county. But at the same time, I'd like to thank all of you for allowing me to serve again. And I'd like to also say that I'm planning to look forward to a great, great, great year and many other years to come. While I'm even not on this board, I expect great things from this Suffolk City School Board, because this is really the policy making of our great city. And again, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. I'd like to ask Superintendent, are we in store for another science SOL, a new science SOL coming up in the next year? Do you know?
You mean as far as the curriculum change
Yes.
as science? I'm not sure exactly when the next science curriculum change.
I thought I saw something in the
2017.
2017.
2017. Thank you. We'll be ready for that one, right? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I have a concern about the academic programs that we're offering, the IB, the STEM program, and the health science program. First of all, the first concern is the teachers that are being selected for those programs. I would hope that we would take the best teachers that not are only available at the school, but system-wide and even outside the system if we have to make sure that we get the best people in those programs if we can.
Oh, I definitely believe that we have done that.
Good. Second thing is I'm hoping that we're not going down the same path that we started out with AP testing where we just not that we allowed everybody, but we didn't have a cut score or anything for those people. What my concern is, especially in IB, is we have deteriorating graduation rates, and I want to see us try to keep from doing that.
We have a set criteria for each of these programs as far as what it takes to get into the program. What we could do, if you'd like, during our next meeting is present to you what the criteria is, talk about the number of students that were eligible, the number of students who have come in there, the success rate of those students as well.
That's right.
I think we have to be mindful that if students do choose to leave the program, It may not be because they weren't able to do it. It may be they've chosen not to do it. But we can also show the numbers as far as IB participation and those who received the
That's
full
where
IB
I was going with that.
diploma
Can
as
you
well.
have somebody come in and,
We can do that.
okay, good. See if I can also like to make sure that we're spending our instructional monies during the year that they're allotted for, the ones that we talked about in English, math, science.
Absolutely, we are. I will say this, that oftentimes we have a budget for a particular content area, and generally every school in the high school has a grade level chairperson. That grade level chairperson works with their teachers to decide what necessary materials they may want, but they also have to consider what do they need. Needs and wants are very different. We're able to certainly try to accommodate with what's needed in order to pass the SOL, in order to make sure students are successful. We can't always get what they all want. The grade level chair works with the principal, and the principal, grade level chair, and teachers decide what materials they'll actually purchase.
Last thing is, the recruitment is in Pittsburgh during March.
We're scheduled to be there.
You did it. Good.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I have nothing else. Mr. Copeland, do you have the?
Yes, be
Report.
glad to give the, I ask that the personnel report be accepted, be adopted, really.
Is that a motion?
Yes, I motion that the personnel report be
I second.
adopted.
Okay.
Second.
Board members will please vote. Motion carried.
I move that the pupil personnel report be adopted.
Second.
Board members will please vote. Motion carried.
Oh, the business.
Chairman,
Oh,
before you,
yes, Miss Ma'am
close the
Mosquito, go right ahead.
Mr. Copeland, you have an announcement to make, event coming off this month of January about your former high school, is it not?
Oh,
Sure, you remember that.
it's 15th of January.
I think so.
Yeah, the 15th of January at the Cultural Arts Center. Thank you, Ms. Skeeter. The Nassau County Training School will present, now you got to help me out on that. Nassau County Training School.
A documentary on,
Yeah, the documentary, yes, documentary.
yeah.
And it will be at the Cultural Arts Center and I don't exactly know the time. I think it's 6 o'clock. But it will relate to the history of National Training School from 1924 to the present time. And I know some people are shaking their heads in 1924. Well, for those of you who don't know the history of this great city, at one time it was a great county. At that time it was Nassau County, where Nassau Training School is located out in the Holland community. It was the first black public high school in Nassau County. And the first graduating class was 1931. And there were about 5 students in that class, 1931. And so it graduated students from 1931 up to 1970. And the name changed from Nassau Training School to Southwestern High School, and which was done in 1964. Became Southwestern High School. Because if you don't know the name of training, most of your black high schools of that day in the South were called training schools. Now, if you ask me why it was called training school, I'll tell you. But it was called training school. Princess Anne Training School, Princess Anne Training School, and we had Union Kingsville became the high school after Princess Anne Training School. But Chesapeake also had a training school, Southampton Training School. All counties had a training school. They were black high schools. So people got confused on that. They weren't really high school, but they were high schools. So, and they were 11th graders. 11th grade, they went to the 11th grade. That's another thing. And the counties at that time in the state of Virginia went to the 11th grade. And if you went to the 12th grade, you lived in the city, which they paid for that 12th grade. The cities did. And in a county that had a 12th grade, it had to pay for it. So the people who finished during that time finished 11 grades. And I was one of them. I finished an 11th grade rule, and the 12th grade was added during the time I was in high school. But since I got in there in the 8th grade, I finished 11th grade. And in 1958, there was no high school in Nelson County. No one graduated in 58. Suffolk City had 12 grades at that time. Suffolk City, they were two separate entities. So we are now having a film to give you the history of your great city, which was then a great county, Nansemond County. So we encourage, it's free, we encourage all of you to come out and to see it. You'll see a lot of voices you see every day. You'll hear my voice, because I was a graduate of that school, and many other people you know in the city now, Harold Falk, my wife, and many others. I go to what to say, but they all were graduates of that school. The school has a great history, and we want it to be known in this city. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
I
didn't
appreciate
graduate from there. I wasn't out there, but it's going to be at the Suffolk Cultural Arts Center, and I don't know the exact time it will be.
6 o'clock, I think.
But you'll see the full documentary, and then what happens, PBS will be doing it during the month of Black History Month. So it would be nice if you all would attend Mr. Copeland's former high school history.
It costs us a lot of money, too, about $10,000 to put it on. So,
That's it.
So we appreciate you all coming and enjoying it. You will enjoy it, I'm quite sure.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Ms. Skeeter, at this time, I contend this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Be safe going home, and don't freeze on the way out the door.
17.